And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts. Alongside me is my counterpart, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir.
I completely forgot that you and I taped this morning. It feels like I didn't speak to you this morning, but it feels like this has been the longest day ever, just trying to digest everything that has happened. Look, we got the chaos, Blake. We said it last week, and we said that it wasn't going to happen, but we got the chaos, and it is.
Oh, who didn't say it?
What? Wait. We said that it was unlikely, but it was possible. That was what we said.
To lose to Florida State. What'd you mean?
But neither of us actually stood on the table here and said that Georgia was going to lose to Alabama. You were a little bit more complimentary of them in saying that you thought it could be closer than I thought it was going to be. But that whole situation played out, which everyone all week spent saying, if Georgia loses, what the hell is going to happen? And I still have no idea if it's the right decision or not.
Yeah, I mean, I did say on Monday last week that I thought that Alabama would keep it close, but I did think that Georgia would ultimately win by 3. The inverse happened, and I got to tell you, in a game like that, Joe, the turnover, the double reverse that Alabama wind up getting, wind up costing them 3 points in a game like that is very costly. But I'm going to tell you something that I know we talked about in pre-production. Down this stretch, Jalen Milroe went off. And I don't think that – I think that separated them down the stretch. Him utilizing his legs ultimately won them the football game. Literally won them the football game. And then what he actually, Joe, did with his arm also down the stretch won them that football game. And I got to tell you, look, man, I know, and I was one of them. So were you. We poo-pooed on Tommy Rees. But the truth was he outcoached Kirby down the stretch and Glenn Schumann. That's the truth.
We're going to end up getting to this, but the one thing I'm most willing to concede, and it's the most painful thing to concede, is I think that what contributed to them winning the football game was great play calling by Tommy Rees. In order to move the ball on that defense, you were going to need to call a really good game. And he did. He stepped up to the plate. He stepped up to the occasion. He identified a weakness that they had at linebacker with the injuries. I thought that despite the injuries that they were going to still find a way to succeed, and they exploited it. They said that, all right, you got these young guys stepping in for Jamon Dumas-Johnson being out, and you're going to try and go up against us with young football players. Good luck doing that against Jalen Milroe, who's hot right now, and it killed Georgia. It did. I give Tommy Rees credit.
We'll talk about the SEC Championship. We did upload a video to our YouTube channel, instant reaction to the college football playoff top 4. If you haven't gone and watched it, go ahead and do that. But, Joe, we'll also talk about the Pac-12. And one thing that I was right about in the Pac-12 title game did happen. I've been on Washington this entire time.
Oh, screw you. Don't you dare come on here and do that. I was texting with you the whole night Friday, and you were trying to do this to me.
Let's go, dogs. Let's go, dogs.
Hey, as much as it pains me that I was so off with the Alabama-Georgia game, I'm taking a damn victory lap for that. For that. I couldn't have predicted that game any more accurately than I did, by the way. And we're going to get to that. I also predicted the Florida State game perfectly without even knowing that the third-string quarterback was going to play. But I swear to God, you better not try and pull that.
Look, Joe, a lot of people do what me and you do and are in the business and are in media. I have no problem when I can admit when I'm wrong. I've been wrong on this team. They do continue to win. And at some point, I'm going to have to come around to them. Just might not be so much today, but
okay.
I got to give Washington this. They were down 4, and McMillan and Penix, welcome to the ball game, because the McMillan kid went stupid. I actually thought the inverse would happen. I thought Oregon would be the team that dominated in the running game like they somewhat did in the first matchup when you just break the film down. Joe, I didn't realize Dylan Johnson would go off like that. Holy Dylan Johnson.
if he plays like that against Texas, they will win that football game. And look, we're going to dive into that. We're going to do an early preview tomorrow, and eventually we'll do like a really in-depth one leading up to the game. But I tell you what, Washington is stepping into a situation where they're playing a very similarly built Texas team. Texas is very similarly built to Oregon, and they beat Oregon twice this year.
Yep.
That says something, and I think that they got a really advantageous matchup for when they play them in the is it the Sugar Bowl?
No, or is it? Yeah, it might be that.
I don't keep up. It's in New Orleans.
Oh, well, if it's in New Orleans, it is the Sugar Bowl. But
Okay.
I will tell you, Washington fans, if you need somewhere, you want somewhere nice to eat, you want some things to do in New Orleans, I will be the person to be able to help you out. I will admit this very quickly before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in reference to Washington. Of the 4 teams that are in, the best matchup that they could have gotten is Texas, because Texas's secondary is still around the 100s in passing yards allowed. That bodes so well for Washington. Now, both teams have a month to prepare, so things can be different. But if there is a team that Washington really, really looks good in the secondary of things. Now, the inverse of that would be that I don't know if they've seen a front 7 that lethal at Texas. Those dudes were pushing guys around.
Yep.
Now that they're fully healthy, we'll preview those games tomorrow. Joe, we talked about this in the pre-recorded show that we did that's uploaded on our YouTube channel. We'll talk about the ACC. I don't want to get into too much of it because we already talked about it a lot, but we will talk about Florida State, them trying to boycott, the ACC trying to boycott. Well, Boo Carrington, or whatever his name is.
Boo Carrigan.
Isn't he the NC State AD?
Yes. Yes, he is.
He's the ACC rep in the College Football Playoff Committee, is he not?
He is.
Okay, well, I mean, I get what you're trying to say. And look, again, Joe, we're a broken record at this point. Do I feel bad for Florida State? Yeah. But I'm sorry, man. It's just they're not one of the best 4 teams right now. And I'm going to get obliterated by that.
Yep.
But it is what it is. And I'm going to say this too. I've been thinking about this all day. The college football playoff is an invitational because it is separate, completely separate from the NCAA.
Yes.
It is an invitational. Yes. So I get what you're saying. It is an invitational to go there. We'll see. I guess we'll just talk about that.
We're going to end up getting into it, but I don't want to bring this up later. I would love to throw out my tinfoil hat theory really quickly right now. I really think that Boo Corrigan probably had some sort of influence in Florida State getting effed out of this, I'm sure. And I would just like to throw out there, I would not be shocked if this is not a catalyst for Florida State to find a new conference, because they've been trying to do it this whole time. And one could argue, and especially Florida State athletic administration could argue, that they were hurt by the circumstance of playing in the ACC. And that was what held them back from possibly getting into the conference or into the playoff.
Tyler says, I want to hear Ruffino say that he thinks Texas is going to win. Keep betting against my dogs. We love that energy. Well, Joe, you know my pick. I mean, so they're going to be shocked when they hear my pick.
Right.
They're going to be absolutely mesmerized. Like it might
Don't pick Washington. Don't pick Washington.
Why? Why can't I?
I don't know. It's not as fun. You can pick whoever you want. I'm mostly joking.
Don't tell me what to do. All right, we'll break down all the rest of the championship games. Maybe we'll get to some newsworthy stuff there at the end. UCLA is losing to DC to their bitter rival USC. Elijah Robinson to Syracuse. We got some. Willie Fritz is going to Houston. I think that. Look, I'm going to tell you that I think that that's a massive deal. Houston's in the in the Power 5 now, so we might talk a little bit. You know what, Joe? At the end, remind me, and guys in the chat, remind me. Let's talk a little bit about Willie Fritz at the end of all of this to put a bow on the show. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share to all those social media groups, share to all of those social media pages. If you're watching us, listening to us on YouTube, like, subscribe, notification bell. Joe, congratulations, my man. 900, almost 900, actually is over 900. Massive month of November for the show.
Insane.
Thank you guys so much. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Adam, who was in the Twitter Spaces last night, sends us $6.99 Canadian dollars.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. I don't know. Don't spend your Canadian dollars all in one place there, Joe. All right. We got a lot to discuss. Let's talk about our good friends at betonline.ag, and we'll be back. Let's break down the SEC, ACC, Pac-12. We do that next. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. They're in the playoff.
We need to take that sound out. Which
one? This one? We're back.
We jinxed it. We spent the whole year playing that sound and then making fun of it, and now they're in the playoff.
Well, your beloved Washington Huskies have the ability and the chance to knock them off so that they don't win a national title.
We'll see.
All right.
Hopefully they do.
SEC Championship game in Atlanta this past weekend, or yesterday if you're watching the show live right now. Joe, I got to admit something. Okay, in games that are as close as what Georgia and Alabama just went through, turnovers, field position, okay, and the better quarterback normally win the game. When everything is equal, which yesterday felt like a lot of things were equal between both teams. Kirby versus Nick. And I know that you could say Nick is more on the pedestal than Kirby. Kirby did just win back-to-back national titles. And by the way, he's out of the playoff. He's won, of the last 30 games he's played, he's won 29 of them. So I'm not going to say that Kirby is anywhere completely lower than Nick. They're right there with one another as of right now. But, Joe, when things are so close, usually whoever has the better quarterback play is going to win at the end. Jalen Milroe down the stretch, late third quarter going into the fourth, is what separated them. Joe, at the end, now you can go back and forth and we can talk about the game, how Georgia struck early. They scored the opening touchdown. Their first drive looked amazing. But then Alabama comes back, gets the field goal. But really both lines of scrimmage were getting after one another. You could say Alabama won the line of scrimmage. I wouldn't disagree with you saying that Alabama on both sides.
I thought it was pretty even.
Well, the only thing about that, Joe, is Georgia could not run the football. We'll talk about this a little bit. They just could not run the football. But I will say, down the stretch, Jalen Milroe was the better quarterback in this game. Whether you want to look at the stats and just say, oh, well, he was 13 of 23. I don't care because, Joe, they were up 3, 20-17. And Alabama gets the ball back. Jalen Milroe said, you know what? Isaiah Bond is a mismatch against Georgia. He goes 4 for 4 for 57 yards. He hits Bond on a 21-yard drag route. Remember, he's under pressure. He hits the little shuffle pass. Then he hits Bond for 13 yards, then 11 yards, and then Williams gets the 1-yard score. Then he turns right around after Georgia would get a touchdown and answer them, runs for 30 yards, slides, ball game. You can say whatever you want to about Jalen Milroe, and I understand it. But the kid is getting better, and that is why they're winning close football games, is the play that he has had down the stretch.
Look, I will give credit, and I already said I give credit to Tommy Rees for the game that he called. What he did with the scheme offensively, I think it was nearly perfect. There were a lot of timely plays that set them up for success to put points on the board. I'll give Jalen Milroe credit for the way that he played a number of the drives that he strung together. He was, we got to be honest with ourselves, far more impactful as a runner than he was as a passer because he made a number of rough throws. He took a couple of like they weren't just sacks. They were 10+ yard sacks where he dropped back and got ripped down. Those are bad sacks. Didn't
against
play
a really good defense.
Yes, against a very good defense. But I think that he played a very impactful and important game. But look, we have to admit to ourselves here, and Alabama fans who already hate me aren't going to like to hear this. But if Georgia was not as banged up as they were coming into this game and dealt with the in-game injuries that they dealt with, I think that the outcome would have been different. I still believe what I said coming into this game, not knowing that Brock Bowers was still heavily dinged up or got re-injured in the time span that he came back. And same thing with Ladd McConkey. And the biggest issue was them losing Amarius Mims. As soon as he comes out of the football game, they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't protect nearly as well. He is integral for their success because of how good of an offensive lineman he is. He's going to be a first-round pick, and not having him really, really killed them. It really killed them. That was the most important loss. But the timing of their injuries, we talked about as they started to get healthy in the middle of the year, the timing of all of it, they were going to be healthy right at the perfect time for them to go on this surge. But we were wrong. They were dinged up. They were starting to get healthy, and they got re-injured. Them not being fully available and to play at full strength hurt them in this game. I give Alabama credit for winning the football game. They fought their asses off. They did everything that they needed to do. But we still have to admit here, if Brock Bowers was fully healthy, if Ladd McConkey was fully healthy, and if Amarius Mims was in this game, I think that the outcome would have been different. They would have won.
If my aunt had a penis, she'd be my uncle.
Look, I understand that, like, I'm throwing out a stupid hypothetical and that pisses fans off, and it pisses me off when people do that too. But we can't act like Alabama came into this game being vastly better than Georgia.
Okay, I'm not going to say that, but they won the football game.
They did, and that's why I'm giving them credit for winning the game.
Let me throw this. I don't want to say defend what you're saying, but let me defend it, or the way that I see it. Okay? Because I'm old enough to remember last night, Georgia scored 14 points in the fourth quarter and should have won the football game, but Georgia's defense can't make a stop. So I understand what you're saying in reference to them being banged up offensively. You're not wrong. But why can't you get onto the defense about not being able to stop a quarterback that no one really has a lot of faith in? Jalen Milroe's not the best quarterback that you saw all year, and he lit you up. Joe, again, it's 20-17. You literally just scored a tutty. They literally just scored a touchdown. And you're going to sit here and tell me, okay, that when you're kicking the ball off, you let Jalen Milroe go 4 for 4 for 57 yards and go down and score. You let them score in the most critical time of the game. Then you go down and score again, and you know that Jalen Milroe is going to run the football. I thought Gary Danielson called one of the better games that I've ever heard him call. He said, listen, Georgia kicks the ball off. Here comes Alabama. He goes, they're going to run Jalen Milroe on a QB power. And what did they do? QB power right up the middle. After 30 yards, he slides, ball game. You're going to have to also explain to me how the team that no one really thinks that can win, when it goes down the stretch, they get pieced apart. Are you going to say that Kirby got out-coached? Are you going to say that Tommy Rees out-coached? Okay,
I don't want to do that, though. I'm not going to go as far as to say that Kirby was out-coached. Yes, Tommy Rees called a really, really good
stop them in the fourth quarter to win.
They're down one of the most important players on their defense with Jamon Dumas-Johnson. That is very important for spying a quarterback and also playing the run game against said quarterback. He is one of the best linebackers, if not the best inside linebacker in the SEC.
Then I can turn it completely opposite. The number one corner for Alabama went down.
That was at the end of the game. And it
was late in the third quarter.
That's late in the game. Wait, but also we have to acknowledge here, like, Alabama doesn't have a deep secondary. They have a very, very deep.
The depth of a team is the point. Them being able to respond after an injury is the point. It's not Alabama's fault And by the way, if you're going to say, oh, well, the receivers were hurt for Georgia, don't tell Alabama fans that. Jamison Williamson tore his ACL when they played Georgia. Remember, Georgia literally, people believe, won a national title against Alabama when Williamson went down. Revenge.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, it's a very good point. You do get revenge for a team you were once dealing with injuries and it hurt you, and now you get to come back. Look, I'm not discrediting the win. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to provide reasoning for what I said leading into the week. I'm trying to defend my point, and I think that my point was reasonable, and I think a lot of people would have freaking agreed with me.
No, you said they were going to get blown out. And what did your buddy Blake tell you?
You said it was going to be a three-point win.
I told you it was going to be a 3-point win either way. And you know,
fully healthy Georgia team, completely different outcome.
Again, if my aunt had a penis, she'd be my uncle. But the bottom line becomes two. Georgia, I understand what you're saying about injuries. Joe, the fumble on the double reverse is not an injury problem.
That's true. Well, actually, that's a really good point here.
It's not an injury problem.
Yeah. Not to, this is less of a debate point, but I do want to bring that up. Georgia in this game seemingly had just a general lack of execution. Like there was the stupid shit that happened with the missed field goal because they had a false start and they had to move back. Something was off just in general with this.
To your point about that, that's what loses close games. That turnover and the false start that pushed you back from 45-yard field goal to a 50-yard field goal, that loses you close games like this, man.
Yeah.
That cannot happen. Now, let me say this, okay? I said earlier that I thought Jalen Milroe was the better quarterback. I still thought in the game, just in the game, he was the better quarterback. 13 of 23 with 2 touchdowns on what, Joe, both of us called the best secondary in the country. I mean, you got to give it to him. The wheel route, I know that you're going to say he's wide open. He is, but he makes the play. The throw that he makes to Jermaine Burton on that dig route, God bless it alive, is a hell of a – I know it's not an NFL throw because he's not an NFL dude. It's a hell of a freaking throw to get a score and take the lead.
So now I'm going to do something that no one thought I was going to do, to glaze Jalen Milroe just a little bit here. I think that what really contributed to Alabama's success and the offense playing as good as it did, Jalen Milroe did something that we haven't really seen at times this season, him do it consistently. For 4 quarters, he was decisive. He was reactive. He made very quick decisions. He didn't hesitate. There were so many times this year, and like it showed up against Auburn, the first half against Tennessee, at times against Texas A&M. There were so many games this year where he was so hesitant and over-calculating and just overthinking things. And I jokingly said he's got the Daniel Jones syndrome of just not thinking quick enough and making the wrong decision. Complete opposite of that. He was the most cerebral I have ever seen him play. And look, I will make this statement, and I know that it goes against every fiber of my being, but if he plays like that for the next 2 games, they do win a national championship. It all falls on his shoulder. Wait. It falls on his shoulders, in my opinion, if they win a national championship. Can he play a similar game that he did against Georgia over the next 2 games? If he falters and makes mistakes, that is going to hold them back. That's why before you jump in here, that is why I've had a lot of hesitation with Alabama, because I feel that there is a very, very thin line for what produces success for them. And that line is either Jalen Milroe plays like crap or he plays amazingly. He plays perfectly. Once he makes mistakes, it takes him out of the game, which happened against Texas.
Let's talk a little bit of Georgia. Joe, their inability to run the football, okay, in my opinion, lost in the football game. Not being able to get the edge. Look, Joe, we do power rankings every single week, and I've come in here and taken a lot of criticism behind Alabama. Joe, when I look at their front 7, I don't give 2 Rudy Poos when anybody tells me. I know that they're a top 3 front 7 in the country. They are that freaking good. The only team that exposed them, in my opinion, which could be what Washington can do, okay, maybe not with the running because Penix doesn't run, would be them. They got exposed by LSU, and that's it. Nobody else truly exposed them. You can say, oh, well, Texas, but that game was completely different because they can't score. They're so much a different team than when they play Texas. They have to hit every deep shot to win in that game, where now you're seeing Jalen Milroe throw a wheel route wide ass open that goes for 6. I think Georgia's inability to run was the biggest thing that I thought. Did I think that they would have a tough time? Yes. Did I think that they would struggle that much? No, I do not. Now, one thing that I will say to start the second half, okay, they got held to 3. They get the ball back. They're going in there. They get the long pass, okay, that gets called by number 11. But here's the part I want to go with this. I do think that Georgia has a little bit of a gripe. The calls that the refs made in this game, I am not the guy that goes blame the ref. I am not blame the ref guy. Brother, that was one of the worst ref games I'd ever seen. And that goes to what everybody says about Bama. They always get the calls. Yeah, they got the calls against Georgia on Saturday, in my opinion.
I think in general, the whole weekend was pretty bad. It's weird. And you know what and this is kind of like a really in the weeds discussion. A lot of times, I don't know if the SEC did it, but they've mentioned it on the Pac-12 broadcast, how they'll bring together an all-star team of officials to call the games.
They never called games together before.
Right. I don't like that decision. I think that's a really stupid approach to say, hey, let's bring together a bunch of guys. That's like bringing together a completely different offense to play a game. And that's hence the all-star game description. Why would you expect them to have chemistry and continuity? That group needs to have worked together. You can't just throw them in there.
Here's the problem I have with that. What relationship do you need with other referees to know if it's pass interference or not?
Well, it could lead to there's still communication and decision-making amongst the officials that influences the decision. They might not like each other and they might argue with one another. We don't really see all that stuff, and one might override the other.
But that still doesn't mean you don't throw the flag. Joe, you tweeted out during the game that number 8, I think it was, or number 9, maybe it was Amos for Alabama. Dude, they missed so many PI calls against Georgia. So many. Like, it was egregious. If there's one gripe I have about Georgia, I think that would be egregious. Let me ask you this.
Yep.
I know Georgia fans are going to want me to ask, so let's go ahead and ask. Should they have been in the playoff?
Not this year. We have never, ever seen 5 teams that won their conference that had undefeated seasons or 1 loss. If this was last year, absolutely. But we can't just straight up just put this team in because they're one of the best teams in the country. They absolutely are. I still believe that fully healthy, if you gave them that month to get healthy, they walk in and they win a national championship.
They beat all 4 of those teams is what you'd say.
Without a doubt. But the problem is we can't just throw out the criteria that we had for making that decision.
Yeah. Here's the only in this year's the reason why you do like the 12-team playoff, but I said it on the show that we recorded and put on our YouTube channel. Again, go listen to it. Joe, you would have potentially, if a team like Georgia loses, right, in the SEC Championship game, you do know that when the 12-team playoffs enacted, Georgia versus Liberty, and my God, all I'm going to say is
actually, it would have been Florida State versus Liberty, but either way, that would have been hilarious. Yes.
You get what I'm saying. Okay, well, I think Liberty might not get a first down. Okay, but you get somebody's going to die in that game. Not literally, but somebody's going to get killed.
It's just look, Oresco, I think is the AAC commissioner. He bitches and moans about everything. And it's kind of hilarious that everyone's upset about so many different things. And then it's just like, what is Mike Oresco talking about? But I actually kind of agree with him. SMU should be playing Oregon. They should be playing Oregon. Liberty does not.
I don't disagree with that. And look, I told you when Rhett Lashley was hired, all right, we came on this show and I said, listen, Rhett Lashley is the biggest no name. I say no name, but nobody was talking about Rhett Lashley, and I made us talk about 15 minutes worth of Rhett Lashley. And look, showed you text. Rhett is a guy that I think with them going into the ACC in that Dallas area and the money that they're spending, do not count out SMU moving forward. All right. Want to get to the Pac-12?
Let's do it.
Pac-12.
Pac-12.
I almost forgot. All right. Pac-12 Championship game. That was on Friday, which I really love that the Pac-12 game was on Friday, but no more Pac-12 title games, it seems like at least not like this. Washington and Oregon. Washington again beats Oregon by 3. Joe, I went first on the SEC, so I'll give you your conference. What did you think of this game?
Oh, Blake, this game was so fun to watch because it played out exactly as I've said the entirety of this year, why Washington is so dangerous. I have said that there are so few teams that when they're firing on all cylinders, and they're gamers, they show up for the big games. They do not show up for their weaker opponents. But this Washington team is so quick to move the ball down the field. They can pick up splash plays in an instant. Roma Dunze cooked, Jalen McMillan cooked, Dylan Johnson cooked. That offense to me is the most dangerous in the country. And I know that you disagree and you think that LSU's is better. Let's not waste our time debating that. Washington's offense is so freaking good. And they were too much for Oregon. Oregon started the game a little bit slow. And any team that they face that starts the game slow is done for. Because then they try to play catch up. When you try to play catch up and switch your philosophy to playing Washington style of game, which is what they want you to do, they've got your ass. I still really believe that Washington has a legitimate shot of winning the national title now that they're placed at number 2. They got a great matchup. This team is back in a position to do some damage.
I forget the Husky fan that told me that I have to wear a Husky hat on the show if Oregon got beat by Washington. DM me and I will wear a Washington hat on this show because of the bet that I lost. Joe, it went completely different than the way that I thought it would. And like I said, I am not a dude that's going to double down and say, hey, I wasn't wrong. I was wrong. I did not think that Oregon would be the team that struggled to run the football. And I was wrong there. And look, I will admit, I still think that Washington, I don't think that they're a complete team. I'm going to continue to have that take. I just don't. I don't think that of the other 4 teams that are here in the playoff, I think they're the least complete. But they might have the biggest strength in what they do offensively, right? I was completely dumbfounded that that not only did I thought McMillan would go off. I know we kind of mentioned that a little bit. I thought that Oregon would be the team that could come in here and bully Washington up front and run the football. And I said that Bucky Irvin, Joe, I literally said if Bucky Irvin, you remember, if he does not get 18 to 20 touches on the ground, they're going to lose. They gave him 9. And it wasn't enough. They abandoned the run way too early. And I know that he was getting stopped early. But just because you're getting 3 yards in a cloud of dust on some runs in a championship game, to me, doesn't mean you should abandon it. But the biggest thing here was Washington controlling the clock, controlling the tempo, even when they lost the lead and Oregon came storming back. So the biggest thing for me here, Oregon was so bad on 3rd down when Bo Nix should have been able to convert. Washington was able to stop them. Holding on to the football for as long as they did, 37 minutes for Washington time of possession. They have not done that all year. But Bo Nix's inability to convert on 3rd down, Joe, they were 3 for 10. Do you want to know what he was passing the football, I might add? 3 for 9.
What is it?
3 for 9. So him going 3 for 9 on 3rd down is abysmal. So I know that he had a lot of hype in reference to the Heisman, and a lot of LSU fans, for example, were constantly tweeting the odds. Bo Nix, I hate to put it on one dude. Bo Nix not being able to convert on those 3rd downs are a big thing, but Washington just ran all over Oregon. They out-physicaled Oregon. I can't believe I'm coming in here and saying that. I did not expect that to happen.
Well, that was one thing that I had always been talking about, and then you disagreed with me. I thought that Washington's offensive line is really freaking good. I've said that the whole preseason up until this point, that there are a number of NFL guys on that offensive line, especially at their left and right tackle spots. They are capable of being more physical, but what they did that has not happened up until this point is that their defensive line showed up and played, and they have that in their capabilities. They can show up and play physically against Texas. I think the biggest attribution, though, to why Oregon lost this game, I think that Will Stein shit his pants. I straight up think that he coached not to lose in his decision-making with all of the play calling. The second that the first drive that they sputtered so quickly, the first 2 3-and-outs that they had to start the game, which you can't do against Washington, I had a very confident feeling that Washington was going to pull out and win this game. You have to be a little aggressive. I'm not saying that you try to call all the same stuff as Washington to go shot for shot with them, but you can't be doing all of this short to intermediate play calling when you already did it against them once and they're prepared for it and they're ready for it. I thought it was really scared play calling, and it was an approach of like, I've been calling this offense this way all year long. Why would I change it? And it freaking killed them. It killed them.
And not only that, Joe, I thought that there were so many opportunities that Oregon should have taken advantage of that they didn't. Let me explain. When Michael Penix threw that interception, Bo Nix cannot turn around and throw his own pick. He's trying to throw the ball away, and he can't get it out of bounds. I don't know if it's arm strength or what he was trying to do. Then he throws an interception. I'm like, what are you doing? At worst, punt, throw it out of bounds, punt it, put them on their own 10-yard line, and wipe your hands of it, right? It's a bad possession. But, Joe, Oregon I felt like in both of these games, and I like Dan Lanning a lot, I felt like it's a little too big for him. It feels like the way that the style and the way that they're coaching is a little bit too much for him right now. He's learning on the job. That's always the problem that you have when you have a first-time head coach. They're learning on the job. He refused to slow the game down. It was like you could tell, and maybe you didn't feel this, but this is the way I felt.
No, I felt it.
I felt like Dan Lanning, even when they went up and scored and took the lead, they felt the pressure the entire time. He didn't just say, let's take a deep breath, run the football a little bit, get some nice completions, put a drive together. And the times that they actually did that, I think they had a 15-yard drive for a touchdown, a 12-yard drive for a field goal that they got in there. When they did it, they had success. But when they felt uptight, you couldn't fit a grease BB, okay, in any – I'm not going to say where you could put it, but you couldn't fit a grease BB anywhere in any orifice of what they have. They play so uptight in these big games. It's Joe, the other big game, I say big game that they played. You can say it's not a big game. Texas Tech on the road in Texas, away from home for the first time. It was the same exact way. Dan's going to have to learn not to be uptight for them to win these big high profile games. And he's going to have them next year when he goes into the Big Ten.
I agree with that. I think that the moment did get a little too big for him, but I'm going to bring this back into what I just said about Will Stein. I also felt just collectively from a coaching standpoint, from a preparation standpoint, it really did feel like Oregon hubristically stepped into this game and said, it is a good word, very, very overly confidently stepped into this game and said, we're going to just play our game the way that it's been working for us during this stretch. Why would we make any adjustments based on the way that the roster is built? Because again, frankly, it comes down to offensive and the defensive decision-making, why they wouldn't be more aggressive and go after Michael Penix and force him to make mistakes. And then on the offensive side of the ball, why would you not pay attention to the deficiencies that they have in their secondary and not take those deep shots? Instead, you allowed their linebackers and their defensive line to make a ton of plays, which is their biggest strength on their defense.
Right.
It's just a really weird approach, and it's just so egotistical to say they're going to have to come down to our level. We're not going to theirs.
Well, I think another thing, Joe, like I'm pretty sure I tweeted this at you or to you. Not only did Bo Nix go 3 for 10 on third, or 3 for 9 on third down, they went 3 for 10 on third down. The simple nature that you allowed a team like Washington to go 10 for 15 and run the football. Joe, I was again completely wrong by the game plan that they would do. You got 3rd and 3 and they're running the football with Johnson. I'm like, who is this team? I was for sure Penix was going to sit back in there and throw it to McMillan. Here's another thing too. Washington's big playability is something that you look again. I talk, and I think you'll back me up on this. I've talked really good about them offensively. Like, think they're one of the best offense. I have, dude. I've called them one of the best offenses in the country. You better give that to me. Don't you poo-poo on that?
Because I don't remember. I'll let our listeners determine if that statement's right or not.
Offensively, they're a really good team. I think what makes them more dangerous now is that we've seen that they can do what they want. Like, I don't remember a game watching Washington and saying, hey, man, if the passing game's off, they can line up and run the football down your throat. And they just proved it to me. Yeah. And so adding that dynamic, they're literally going to have to do that in the playoff to win it. Now, I think Texas is the best matchup for them, and good on them. But, man, this is the second time that I felt like Dan Lanning, we're coming in here talking about this game, and Dan Lanning just screwing the pooch and being a little too uptight.
I'm sure in the future, I'm very high on Dan Lanning as a coach.
Me too.
I don't think he's on that James Franklin level of just falling asleep and not showing up in big games. I really think that this transition to the Big Ten is going to help because they play that physical identity. So the future is bright. We shouldn't jump to conclusions that Oregon will never get over the
hump. I think they'll get over the hump.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I don't see a scenario where they're going into the Big Ten, Joe. They're going into the Big Ten. So, look, last thing before we get out on the Pac-12 segment. What a hell of a ride for the Pac-12. What a hell of a ride for Pac-12 after dark.
R.I.P.
What do we do now?
It's a good question. The Big Ten better schedule some, and the Big 12 better schedule some late night games.
They're going to have to. They can't. They're going to have to.
I find it hilarious, though, that this year's Pac-12 championship game was significantly more viewed than the USC-Utah one. And USC is supposed to have this this national brand. It's just a nice little, F you to USC on the way out.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you this. It won't happen like that for USC again because they'll have the entire Midwest watching.
Right.
They won't be isolated. All right. You want to get to the ACC?
Yeah, let's do it.
Do you want to take a quick break, talk about Home Field Apparel, and then come and talk about the ACC? All right.
Sure.
Let's talk about our good friends over at Home Field Apparel. Joe, I am wearing
the other home field shirt that you have.
My other Home Field Apparel shirt. Dude, these shirts are so freaking nice, man.
I'm going to order more.
Oh, I am too. Well, apparently I got to order a Washington one.
You better. I'm ordering a Washington one.
If LSU and Alabama weren't bitter rivals, I would come in here wearing the Bama one.
Boo.
But I can't do that because my LSU podcast would burn up in flames. Use that promo code Ruffino Joe. They got, I think, Joe, you said they have the Black Friday sale, or they got sales going on for all of Christmas.
Whole Christmas, there's sales.
Go to Home Field Apparel. Use that promo code Ruffino Joe. Don't go anywhere. Did Florida State get snubbed? We talk about that next.
Ruffino and Joe Show is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, which is the best, without a doubt, premium collegiate apparel brand that is out there. They have over 150 different colleges that you can choose from, whether you're an Illinois fan or a Rutgers fan, maybe you're an LSU fan like Blake, or maybe you're an Alabama fan, whatever it is, even Idaho. They have so many different designs for so many different football programs that I can guarantee you're going to find some great stuff to help root for your favorite team. I've already gotten my Notre Dame stuff. Blake has his LSU stuff. Make sure you head on over to homefieldapparel.com to check out your team's collection of clothing, apparel that they have on the website. And when you do so, when you check out, make sure you use promo code Ruffino Joe to get 15% off your order. That is RUFFINO, Ruffino Joe. Head on over to homefieldapparel.com and get your college gear today.
Something that Keon Coleman doesn't have to wait to listen to. I mean, golly, man. Yeah, I hate what we're about to have to do. But here we go. ACC Championship game, Florida State and Louisville. Joe, let's just get it out of the way first. Okay, before we break down the game, Florida State obviously is the talk of college football right now, not being one of the 4 teams in the playoff. I'm going to kick it to you. We did our show on this. If you want to get our college football playoff reaction, you can go watch that video. Let's do it again. What are your thoughts about Florida State being out and being what some believe to be snubbed from the playoff?
Well, first of all, I'm going to take another victory lap here. Perfectly broke this game down in the sense that their defense, I talked about how their defense was so elite that it was going to be problematic for Louisville to keep up with. And I also believe that their weapons, they had such a tough time getting Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman the football. But Trey Benson made up a number of big plays. The second running back, whose name is escaping me right now,
number 9.
Number 9. I'm gonna look it up in a second. But he had a number of.
I can't say it. It's like Telefole or I can't say it either. But
I'm gonna look it up in a second. He had a number of massive plays. This
Wildcat,
team,
baby, Wildcat.
This team is so freaking deep at every single skill position. It's fantastic. I still really do believe that if Tate Rodemaker was available, played in this game, I think that it would have been a far more dominant, easy victory for Florida State. Because as much as there's a gap between Jordan Travis and Tate Rodemaker, there's a pretty big gap between Rodemaker and the third stringer, Glenn, that played in this game. That kid's fun. That kid would never step on the field for Florida State.
Not this year. I mean, he needed a year.
I just don't. There is such a significant drop off. I think that Rodemaker would have led that team to a 20-plus point victory, and our thoughts on Florida State would have been completely different. But the concussion protocol, I mean, shit, maybe even bringing him back into the game last week is what led to all of this happening. The concussion protocol preventing him from being available. I would argue that if Rodemaker played, they would have been the 4th team, and our discussion today would have been completely different. We made this decision, the committee made this decision solely because they did not want to put a team in there that did not have a competent offense, and there was too big of a question mark. I firmly believe that they were snubbed. I think it's fine that Alabama is in, and I think that Alabama is going to provide a much more competitive matchup, and they're deserving of being in there based on what they did yesterday. But Florida State with Tate Rodemaker would have been able to compete and fare for themselves, and I think that they would have played Michigan completely fine.
What stinks about this, and I'm going to still give myself a little bit, you talk about victory lap. Both of us picked Florida State to win or to win the ACC. We both picked them to be in the playoff. I'm going to pick them to be in the playoff. Like I'm going to take the lap on, hey man, we both picked them. They should be in there. Joe, for me, if we're going to break the game down in reference to the way that they looked, okay, and the way that they looked in reference to them being out of the playoff, I disagree in the sense that I don't know how that would have played out, but I think they got it right in the sense of by their own criteria, they say
yes,
if key players are injured, that goes into the equation. Yes. I also believe, okay, that wins and losses are created differently for different teams in different conferences. Being able to do and have the wins that Bama has. Joe, look at what they did against New Year's Six teams. No team played more bowl acceptance teams than Alabama did. Alabama played arguably the toughest schedule in the country. You can make that argument. All right. With that being said, a one loss against a Texas team who's also in the playoff, it's not that big of a loss. If they would have lost to a team like Purdue when Ohio State lost to Purdue that year, I've been like, yeah, you can't slip. That can't happen. But the simple nature that their only loss is to the number 3 team and Jordan Travis is out, I would have put him in. And I told you this, and we talked about it on Twitter Spaces, okay?
Uh-huh.
I hear everybody saying, oh, it's the SEC Invitational or it's this Invitational. Yes, it is an Invitational. The college football playoff has nothing to do with the NCAA. If you don't believe me, go look it up. It's a separate entity from itself. I just don't think that they're the better team. And you could say, well, they're more deserving. No, they're not deserving. They earned the right to be undefeated. But I just don't think that you can put them in knowing that you're sending them to the slaughter. Joe, they went 3-and-out against Florida. They went 3-and-out against Louisville. And there's not a defense that they're going to see, maybe other than Washington, that they're going to not have success with Rodemaker or not.
This is where I think you and I really disagree, because I think you and I both see why Alabama got in, and we understand the argument of why Florida State could have gotten in. I don't think that Florida State gets their asses kicked by all 4 of these teams. Like that seems to be the public perception, that they would show up and it would be like
TCU. Their asses kicked by some of them. I said they get their asses kicked by all of them.
I don't think that happens, though. I think that defense, and like seriously, that defense is really freaking good. That defense was so good last night that they single-handedly won them the football game when they couldn't move the ball on offense. They created turnovers. They created massive pressures. They kept Louisville completely out of the conversation of even being in a position to win that football game when it mattered most. That defense is nothing like what TCU had last year when they got smoked by Georgia.
Sure.
That team with Tate Rodemaker is better than the TCU team that went to the national championship last year. They would have shown up and been far more competitive.
I also saw a backup quarterback in Will Brown for Florida have times running all over that defense too.
Don't act like he had like some crazy performance.
He busted off like a 27-yard run.
Defenses they're not going to be perfect. Just because they give up a 20-yard run here or there.
12-0.
They still came back and won that game.
Sure. Okay. Against a 5-7 Florida team. They're struggling on the road against 5-7 Florida.
You've talked about how difficult it is to win in the swamp.
I find it absolutely crazy to me. It is absolutely just unequivocally crazy to me that you can come in here on this show and bash on Alabama for what happened at Auburn, but then you turn right around in a rivalry game and say, oh, well.
Wait, I didn't bash on Alabama for Auburn. All I pointed out is that some of their deficiencies were clearly there. And I don't disagree that some of the deficiencies that Florida State has were made available to us when watching the Florida game. But you can't the whole week talk about how Florida State's not going to win because it's so hard to go into the swamp. And then when they win the game, you suddenly are discrediting it. Your argument immediately changed and started being, oh, it was a 5-7 Florida team. It
is a 5-7 Florida team. Joe, I said it last week. How you say I'm flip-flopping?
You did flip. I'm not saying you flipped. Actually, I am saying you flip-flopped.
You're saying I flip-flopped. I didn't flip-flop. I had a number 5 last week. How did I flip-flop?
Leading up to the Florida game, you spent the whole week saying that the swamp was too hard for them to win in with a backup quarterback, and they won with a backup quarterback in the swamp. And then immediately after that game,
incompetence, parts of it too.
But since then, you have continuously brought up that game and said that it disqualifies their capabilities.
Again, when we're talking about finite hairs, yes. If we're comparing finite hairs against one another in Florida State without Jordan Travis and seeing what both of those kids, Joe, are you 1,000% sure that he can come back from concussion protocol? I know that sounds ridiculous. I know that sounds crazy, right? Yes, more than likely he's going to come back and he's going to play against Georgia.
After a month, yes.
Okay, he's going to come back. But, I mean, you got to take into the equation that they have a massive loss with Jordan Travis. Yes, their defense is exceptional. I'll give it to you. I'm not trying to say that they're not a good team. But if you think that they're going to keep out a one-loss SEC team, or that they should keep out Alabama for beating the number one team in the country that everybody thought was impossible, is a bigger win, okay? And their only loss, playing 5 ranked opponents, being 4-1, the accomplishments that Alabama have is more than Florida State. If during the year Florida State would have beat more ranked teams, I think that you can make the argument that their resume is too heavy for you not to put them in. But the simple nature is, Joe, they have a 55th strength of schedule. They did not play anybody throughout the year. And you know that every single week, whether it be Ole Miss, A&M, LSU, Georgia for the national title, Texas in week 2, they're constantly playing teams that Florida State is not. So if I look at Alabama and say to myself, the product that Joe, they had to go to Wildcat to score a touchdown.
Because they're using a third stringer on a short week.
That's the point. It's not a short week.
Sorry, not a short week. A third stringer with limited time to prepare for having to. I think that is a huge accomplishment that they found a way to win that game against a ranked team with a third stringer, and they're doing what they did in that game. Look, I understand what you're saying. You know, we said this in the reaction show for anyone who wants to go tune into that. I understand all that. I understand why Alabama got picked. But when we really dive deep on this, if it was 2 teams that had one loss collectively and 2 similar one losses, say Florida State lost.
Why I'm trying to think what this against Alabama instead of Texas. Why?
Because the head-to-head has to matter as well.
No, hold on. Listen to me. Take Alabama out of the equation. Let's say Florida State and Alabama. Take that argument out of the equation. Now do it against Texas. Now make your argument.
Florida State deserves to be in it way more than Texas does, without a doubt.
Stop right there. If what everybody and we should clip this, what everybody in the country is doing is that they're making their comparison Florida versus Alabama.
Because the problem is there is this desire to put Alabama in because they won the SEC, and because they won the SEC and they're in the playoff, you can't keep Texas out, because as divisive as this debate is, it would have been a way more convoluted argument to explain why Texas doesn't get in, despite them beating them.
Hear me out. Can we have a conversation between Florida State and Texas for just a minute?
I don't think there is a conversation. I think Florida State has a far more impressive resume.
I think there's a massive conversation.
They have a far more impressive resume than Texas does.
Okay, so what you could have done, all right, is make that same argument and then figure out what you're going to do with Alabama and Texas. Everybody and their mama, okay, saying this is an Alabama and Florida State argument. It's not solely an Alabama-Florida State argument. You know what they could have done? They could have put Texas in and Florida State and kept Alabama out. They didn't do that. They literally put 2 one-loss teams in there over Florida State. And you know what they're saying? They're not better than either one of those teams, and you know that they're not. So
I don't think that's what that is, though.
It is what it is. Joe, Texas' strength of schedule. Okay, if you want to talk about them, they lost to Oklahoma on a neutral site too.
They have to. What I'm trying to say here is I don't think that moving Florida State back to 5 is them saying, oh, there's all of these teams are better than Florida State. Clearly, they were in a position where if they were going to find a way to put Alabama in, they had to put Texas in and ahead of Alabama because they won the head-to-head.
Again, if the argument should have been, you're going to have to make the argument between Texas and Alabama. The simple nature that nobody wants to have the conversation that they should have been in there over Texas too is a problem.
I don't think that there is a debate about Texas versus Alabama because it's the only circumstance that we have where those two teams played each other and one beat the other.
You're
I'm not.
misunderstanding. Yes, you are.
You're trying to say that we should have debated more about Texas and Alabama and not about Florida State and Alabama. That's what you're.
Spot, okay, but the problem has been nobody is willing to say, well, okay, I understand the Alabama and FSU argument. Nobody is willing, or do they have the nuts to come out here and say Florida State should be over Texas? And you know that that's true. Everybody wants to look at this is the SEC, and the SEC is going to get the privilege. The bullshit, it's not, because the Big 12 is also going to make $70 million off of Texas being in that playoff.
Wait, but I would argue, though, this whole thing still continually plays into the SEC bias that everyone's complaining about because
Joe, they're going to have $70 million.
Texas gets in because they beat the SEC champion. Do you see where I'm getting at here? They're in solely because if they didn't play Alabama and they had one loss, say they beat Washington or Florida State or something like that, I don't think that the argument is strong. The committee favors the fact that they beat the SEC champion and then in turn puts the SEC champion in. That's where the bias comes from.
I get that. I'm not debating that. What I'm saying is if you're going to have the argument with FSU and Bama, you're going to also have to have it with Texas.
Okay. I get what you're saying. I don't necessarily – because I don't think that there is a debate. I think that you had to – they were forced because of wanting to find a way to get Alabama in. They were forced to.
If you put it, Joe, here's the truth. As a college football fan, do you think that they got it wrong? Yes or no?
No, I think that they put out a far more competitive field, which is important. But for this whole conversation, you had to. If Alabama's in, you have to put Texas in. Texas can get in without Alabama being in.
Correct.
Because Texas beat Alabama. We're not going to agree on this.
All right. You want to move to kind of wrap up the other couple of championship games and maybe get to Willie Fritz?
Yeah.
All right. What did you think of the Big Ten title game? What did you think of the speaking of Texas, you know what? Let's go to the Big 12 title game. Big 12 championship game, Oklahoma State, Texas. Joe, both of us said it was going to be a splattering. My God, it was a splattering.
Yeah, I don't even think that there was even a doubt for a second that Oklahoma State was going to be able to play even close in this one. And it's kind of weird, but I feel like I didn't really learn anything about Texas. Like, we knew coming into this game that Oklahoma State secondary wasn't going to be able to keep up with them. They were far, far too explosive. Their defensive line is an SEC defensive line that not a single other Big 12 team has, and it's why they're deserving of being in there after everything that has happened. I'm a little concerned, though, of what happens with Xavier Worthy. I know that they said that there were negative x-rays on his injury, but I'm a little bit concerned because without Xavier Worthy, that offense is not as explosive. It takes a step back.
I agree with that. Okay, they do have a month. All right, let's see what happens there. Look, we both came in here and said that Alan Bowman had to go completely stupid. He did not. He is one of the – look, the kid's just not good. They got to get one of these quarterbacks out of the portal. I'm sorry. He's not good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any debate with that. I don't think
anyone's... So, listen, I got to admit, Oklahoma State has got some dudes. Like, dude, they were getting open, and he's wide open missing them.
It's – with the whole market of the transfer portal, it does create this really difficult – situation of trying to go and find someone. But I agree, they need to bring some talent into that room because the best that they could do was bring in a kid who was a backup at Michigan. Like, that was the best that they could do, and they were rotating multiple guys at the beginning of the year. That's just a lack of preparation and recruiting for an offense that at one time was producing some pretty talented players. I remember when Spencer Sanders was one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12, and I mean, Mason Rudolph, the guy was a backup for a long time and talked about it as maybe a long-term developmental starter in the NFL. They have had such a drop-off, and that quarterback development and recruiting needs to change.
Thoughts on the Big Ten title game?
I'm a little concerned. I understand I understand that Iowa's defense is as good as it is, but at the same time, for J.J. McCarthy to play a sloppy game and to take the sacks that he did, that has to be paid attention to going into the playoff.
I know that Phil Parker's not leaving or going anywhere. If I'm one of these new head coaches, Mike Elko, but Mike's going to call his own defense, or Brian Kelly, I would tell him, hey, look, man, we're going to pay you $3 million.
That would make him the highest paid coordinator.
Don't give a shit. You're clear. If you're a P5 team that's in the SEC, ACC, some of you are clearing over $99 million. Joe, LSU is an example, cleared $99 million.
They should pay him.
Pay him. That man, that dude, bro, Iowa. Let me tell you something about Iowa, man. If they had an offense, they'd win the Big Ten. If Iowa had,
I don't disagree with that.
Because look, the only reason I say that was the one play, the punt where the kid misses, gets up and tracks somebody down. Defensively, dude, they have no help. I mean, offensively, dude, they have no help. They are the worst offense, 130th out of 130 teams in total offense. If they were 50th on offense, they'd win the Big Ten.
It's crazy too how good defensively that they are. With that, like, there's one blue chip
dudes that already have established 401ks.
There's one blue chip guy in Cooper DeJean, but the rest of those guys are not going to really sniff the NFL. It's crazy the level of production that they've had. But to kind of keep this focused on Michigan, yes, I understand that is a really hard team to score 26 points against, but it was a sloppy game. Like, if we go back and we actually really break that game down and watch it, there are a lot of mistakes. There are a ton of mistakes that happen offensively. And again, they're not going to face. Actually, they will face a defense as good as Iowa's if they face off with Alabama in the championship. Oh, wait, well, they're playing. I thought they were playing Washington off the top of my head. They're going to face a much tougher defense. They can't make those mistakes against Alabama.
They cannot, and I'm going to tell you, do I think Michigan's D-line front seven's really good? Yeah. But I'm telling you, the style of play that they've seen all year, they did not play a dude that can run on them. The times, Joe, that they had issues, Maryland, was a dude that could move a little bit. The Tagovailoa kid can move a little bit, and they struggled. I am telling you, this is not a good matchup for Michigan, because as soon as Jalen Milroe hits that edge, watch out. I'm telling you.
I still think
you want to bet $50 on it?
I'm not betting money with you, man. I'm not doing it because I don't need to resent you because you beat me.
All right, how about this?
There is not a team in the country that has as athletic edges and as deep of an edge group and as athletic of linebackers as Michigan.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree.
If somebody can play the spy game and like really track his ass down, it's Michigan.
We'll see, because I don't think Michigan's defense is better than Georgia's.
But Michigan's defense is not dealing with any injuries right now.
True, but dude, you replaced a 5-star with another 5-star.
Yeah, but you're still throwing young guys in there that
all right.
We can both agree that the linebackers could not keep up with Jalen Milroe. That was why he was so successful. The country's
keeping up with Jalen Milroe when he puts his foot in the dirt and goes.
Watch Junior Colson go to work,
all right.
Man. I'm telling you.
All right, I'll bet lunch with you. All right, to wrap this up, do you want to get to this Willie Fritz to Houston story?
Yeah, let's hit it.
Willie Fritz, the former Tulane head coach, is heading to Houston. Joe, I got to admit, Willie is a really good coach. You got to be able to see him close and personal while he was here in the state of Louisiana at Tulane. Going back to the state of Texas, a guy that was the head coach from 2010, I think that maybe 2013 or 14 at Sam Houston State, went to Georgia Southern, won games there, goes to Tulane, now goes to Houston, who is now a Power 5 program. I think it's a hell of a hire for Houston. He's going to recruit. He's going to develop. He is going to destroy the recruiting in that local Houston area. I'm telling you, I've seen it with Willie before. He's going to dominate that local recruiting area. He did it in New Orleans. He is arguably one of, at least to me, the best evaluator of talent that I've seen. Getting guys like Tajay Spears. Remember Tajay Spears? Okay,
Yeah.
going stupid.
Log.
LSU thought the kid couldn't play. I'll just tell you. They thought the kid couldn't play. Here comes Willie Fritz. And all of a sudden, the guy's beating USC in a New Year's Six bowl. It is a hell of a hire for Houston.
I love that what he has done is, one, identify quality talent and then develop it. There have been Dorian Williams and Michael Pratt and all these guys that they've had have just been fantastic in his time at Tulane. And it deserves significant recognition that Tulane was like a 2-win team. And then he turned them around to, being in the conference championship conversation. They won the Cotton Bowl.
4 games in this first, dude. I remember back in 2017, I think he went like 4-8 and 5-7, and they were about to fire him. They were legitimately about to fire him.
He is going to, and I would assume Houston's probably going to be his last stop because he's on the older side. He's in his early 60s. But heck, if Houston could turn into being a really good team in the Big 12, it's going to be because of Willie Fritz. And he is in a position to now not have academic standards to uphold with recruiting and also have a hotbed for recruiting in that Texas area. That Houston area, there's no reason why they can't dominate specifically recruiting in that Houston area, which produces a ton of kids.
And look, man, he already knows the coaches in the state of Texas, because if there's any coach, like head coach, that knows more high school coaches in the area, it's a FCS.
Well, except Jeff Traylor, maybe.
Well, I mean, like, in reference to if you're at a big school like Texas, you don't really have to know the coaching staff at a high school.
No,
you can, but look, you're Texas, right? Like, you're going to get the kid to come on a visit regardless. You don't need the head coach. You need the head coach for a kid that's going to the FCS.
Yes.
Right? So I think it's an amazing hire and good one that Willie is going back to the state of Texas. Now Tulane opens up. I think that's one of the more interesting jobs in the country based off of what he's done. He's built a winner there. Blake Baker's the name to watch out for that one.
I would also throw out there Chesney from Holy Cross. Holy Cross has been his name's been brought up for the Duke opening as well. Massive ascension to being a really good Patriot League team, has produced a number of guys that are going to get big P5 offers. Very, very smart coach, a builder. And the big thing too, you need to pick somebody who has a background of coaching at schools that are academically focused. If you don't do that, you're going to have a guy that doesn't understand how to, work the admissions room and all that stuff.
Well, if anybody knows in reference to doing that, I think Missouri DC, Blake Baker, who played there, knows exactly the academic requirements, which reminds me, did you see Eli Drinkowitz, speaking of Missouri, did you see Eli Drinkowitz, who's going to play Ohio State in their New Year's Six bowl game? Tell Reese Davis, he goes, oh, wait.
I saw that.
Excuse me, Reese. I got Connor Stallions calling. Look, man, I got to be honest.
Drink's funny, man.
I'm really starting to like Drink.
I think that Missouri is going to keep getting better.
I do too. Especially with their NIL law. Them being able to pay kids in high school.
Yeah.
Amen. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow. We break down the college football playoff. We do a little preview on it. Until then, we'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good night. Peace.